Chapter 31. Rain's phone began ringing on the bar just as Liam picked up a can of shaving cream in the bathroom. Absently shaking the can, he watched from the corner of his eye as she walked in from the balcony and picked up the phone to look at the caller's number. She hesitated, biting her lip. Then she raised the phone to her ear and answered the call. With the hot water running in the sink, he couldn't hear what she was saying, but her shoulders were stiff, her head was bent, and she was rubbing the back of her neck with her free hand. Her body language spoke of tension and apprehension. From that, Liam deduced that her boyfriend was either telling her he was planning to leave for the island, or else giving her hell for not picking his other calls. A few moments after the call began, it ended, and she put the phone down. The call hadn't lasted long enough for any sort of temperamental outburst from the boyfriend, which meant he wasn't mad at her for not picking any of his calls. And now, the only remaining logical conclusion was that Rain's boyfriend had simply told her he was coming to Maranta. Also, based on the brevity of the call, Rain hadn't attempted to discourage him from coming. That was not the behavior Liam had expected from her after all the time they'd spent together, and after he'd told her that he was ready for whatever lies ahead of them. She obviously didn't take him seriously, or she would have told her boyfriend about her decision to break up with him. When Rain walked into the bathroom, Liam was standing at the sink with a towel around his hips, shaving. Surprised by the sweet intimacy of the moment, she leaned against the vanity and watched in the mirror as he finished shaving his throat. His face was covered in lather, with nothing visible except black eyebrows, long-lashed deep dark eyes, and a finely sculpted, sensual mouth. He rinsed the razor under running water and glanced at her in the mirror, his mouth quirking in a half-smile at her fascinated interest in his act of shaving. Then he resumed his task. Stroke by deft stroke of the razor, his tanned face, with its chiseled jawline and strongly molded cheekbones, began to emerge from beneath the lather. Rain watched, but thoughts of the phone call she just received from Max's secretary soon furrowed her forehead into a worried frown. According to his secretary, she and Max had worked late into the weekend nights, and Max had finally hammered out satisfactory results with the other company. He had tried to call Rain from his office to tell her he was catching a 3:30 a.m. flight, arriving at 12:35 p.m., Maranta time. But all he'd gotten was a voicemail message at the villa and on her phone. Refusing to leave a voicemail message to her again, he'd flung his phone down on the sofa and instructed the nervous secretary to start calling Rain and to keep trying until the secretary actually heard Rain's voice. "If I were you, Miss Wallace," the secretary had nervously warned, "I'd meet him at the door with a soothing smile and a sexy outfit. He's pissed off over a call he received from someone yesterday, and not being able to get through to you for 2 days." Max was going to be feeling a lot worse, Rain knew, when she met him at the door with her luggage packed and her final decision about their relationship. Liam noted her expression in the mirror. "You look like a troubled woman," he observed conversationally. "He's on his way to Maranta," she announced. "That's definitely a big issue. I need to meet him at the villa to explain everything to him there. But I'm not sure what to do or say. That's an even bigger problem." Surprised and a little hurt by his flippant responses and seemingly cavalier attitude toward a situation that was going to be very difficult for her, Rain said quietly to hide her hurt, "You seem to know it all. Do you have any advice for this kind of situation? Since he's already on his way, we can't change the situation," he replied, rinsing off the razor again. "But we can make it work by following a simple rule." Rain watched him shave his upper lip, and then she said, "What exactly is the rule?" "The rule we all have to follow here is simple. Assuming you decide to choose him over me, I am obliged to willingly step aside so he can spend the rest of his vacation with you and try to win you back." "What's his role?" she asked. Passing the razor from jaw to cheekbone on the left side of his face, he said, "Once he realizes you want to be with someone else, he should accept it gracefully, wish you well, and then get the hell out of your life." "And what's mine?" "You need to make him understand you're serious as quickly as possible, within hours, not days, and to avoid letting him get you near that nice big bed while you're doing your explaining and convincing." The reason for his curt tone and his reference to the bed hit her, and Rain stared at him. "Are you jealous?" "Not yet, but I'm getting there," he said, making short, quick razor strokes beneath his left ear. "But why?" Rain said, trying to hide how shamefully pleased she was by his admission. "I can't just break up with him over the phone or at the airport. I need to be at the villa to explain and let him down gently." Instead of responding to that, Liam rinsed off his face and asked a question of his own. "How long is the flight from Zen?" About 9 hours, because there are no direct flights. Liam wasn't getting any of that. He gave her a side eye and said, "It seems to me that encouraging him to fly 9 hours to get here, expecting he's going to be with you for the rest of his vacation, is a questionable way to let him down gently." It finally dawned on Rain that he was under a mistaken impression that she'd spoken to Max and encouraged him to come back, and she quickly clarified the situation for him. That call was from his secretary, not him. She told me his flight left at 3:30 a.m. and arrives at 12:35. I didn't think he'd come with only 4 days left of our vacation. If I'd talked to him before he left, I wouldn't have let him come thinking things were the same between us, she explained. I'm sorry. I should have realized that. Rain smiled to ease his worry, but she was intrigued by realizing her influence over him and curious about the rules he mentioned so confidently. Wanting to play a harmless game to tease him and see how much he truly cared about her, she crossed her arms, tilted her head, and pretended to look at her nails. So, what would you do if I changed my mind about breaking up with my boyfriend? The studied nonchalance in her voice instantly alerted Liam to what she was up to, and he suppressed a smile as he reached for a towel. He was no stranger to the subtle power dynamics between men and women. In that case, he said calmly, the rules are very clear and simple. You would need to call me to say you have changed your mind, and then I would switch roles with him. You would just gracefully accept defeat, wish me well, and step aside? Rain asked, disappointed. Liam's smile turned into a grin behind the towel. Are you sure you want to play this game with me, sweetheart? I don't think so, she said cautiously, and he laughed. He lifted his brows, waiting for a verbal comeback, and when she had none, he gave her a boyish grin of satisfied superiority and turned back to the sink to comb his hair. Rain glanced at her watch. I don't want him to have to watch me packing, so I need to be finished before he arrives. So I should leave in 15 minutes. She glanced down at the shirt she was wearing, which belonged to Liam, and the black shorts she'd randomly grabbed after her shower, and decided to quickly change into something else, preferably pants for what lay ahead of her. I need to change my clothes, she said aloud as she walked over to the closet. She took out a pair of dark pants and noticed that the black dress and shoes she'd worn the night before were missing. Do you know where my black dress from last night is? Liam paused, comb in hand, and frowned in disbelief at the fact that she planned to wear such a dress to go break up with her boyfriend. If you plan to wear that while explaining and letting him down gently, I think you've missed the point of our rules. Rain was taken aback by his stern tone. Then she realized he'd misunderstood her yet again and smiled. She had no intention of wearing the dress, she'd simply asked because it wasn't in the closet. But then the realization that he was jealous made her pleased. She slid serenely onto the chair at the dressing table opposite the sink and began to brush her hair. There's that tone again, she mused as if thinking to herself. Was that the sound of a jealous man who says he'd let me go without protest if I changed my mind today at the villa? Briefly closing his eyes in surprise that he'd fallen into her trap of revealing his jealousy, Liam silently sighed and decided not to argue with her. Yes, he was jealous. It was a normal reaction for any male who sensed his woman was about to slip past his fingers. And now that he had decided to commit to a relationship for the first time, he would never allow another man to step into his territory or dare to lay a finger on his woman. As he watched her brush her glossy red hair, he couldn't remember ever feeling as utterly light-hearted and content as he felt at that moment. Mr. Ramirez took our clothes from last night away while you were in the shower. He'll return everything nicely cleaned in a little while. A few minutes later, after she finished changing, Rain joined Liam on the balcony, where he was standing at the wall, looking out at the water. I have to leave, Liam. He turned, noticed the suitcase she was carrying, and the sight of it gave him a moment's panic that she'd leave and never return to him before he realized she'd needed to pack her things at the villa. The cheerful mood of a few minutes earlier turned somber as she put the suitcase on the table and walked over to him to say goodbye. Are you sure you don't want me to go with you and wait somewhere inside the hotel restaurant while you talk to him? He asked, slipping his hands around her waist. Rain rested her hands against his chest and shook her head. Beneath his white knit polo shirt, she could feel his heart beating in a slow, steady rhythm, and she drew strength from that. I need some time alone before I see him, time to separate mentally and emotionally from us and focus on him instead. I'll meet you in Pineville, right where we got off the boat yesterday, at 5 p.m. Depending on how he reacts, you may end up there in a lot less than 3 hours after you break the news to him, he pointed out. Then I'll use the time to separate myself from him and begin to focus on us. How about that? Liam nodded and smiled down into her green eyes, admiring her ethics and sense of fairness. She smiled back, the breeze teasing her hair, her fingers splaying across his heart in a tender touch he was already associating with her. She was absolutely right, Liam knew, about the wisdom of forgetting about them for the next few hours. "Kiss me goodbye," he said, prepared to give her a brief, chaste kiss, but she wrapped her arms around him, molded her parted lips to his, and gave him a long, scorching kiss that made his hands flex and his fingers dig into her back. "I'm going to miss you," he whispered as the kiss ended and she picked up her suitcase. "I'll be back before you know it," she assured, beaming at him. Liam stayed where he was, rather than walking her to the door of the suite, but his view from the balcony included the main entrance of the hotel, so he saw her a few minutes later when the doorman signaled a car arranged for her and put her suitcase into the back seat. As the car passed below their balcony, she smiled and waved at him through the open window. "Hurry back," he called to her, and she nodded. The car made a U-turn and drove off down the private drive toward the main road, and Liam watched it vanish. Then he turned his head toward the beach and leaned his forearms on the balcony wall, watching a cruise ship gliding slowly across the horizon. Tomorrow, he decided, he'd take Rain to his new home in the country he'd planned to move to. He would arrange his jet, and they would go there for a few days. When Neil and Mia returned from New York, he would tell them the news of him finally taking a girlfriend he genuinely liked from the bottom of his heart. Rain was going to like his new home. He knew it. And though Neil would make fun of him for going against his words of never sticking with one woman, he didn't give a damn. He'd found the one for him, and he would never let her slip away. Never. Chapter 32. Far away from the island, in Mirage Mesa City, inside the skyscraper building of the Mirage Mesa field office, the FBI office was unusually quiet because Will Parker's assistant was keeping it that way by frowning at anyone who came near Will Parker's office and putting a finger to his lips to silence them so he could hear what was being said inside the office. Inside the office, two of the Thompson sisters stood by the far wall, watching Will Parker get his key witness ready for the investigation into their stepbrother, Alvin Thompson's murder. They'd all been called to the FBI office this morning, with the news that Alvin's decomposed body had been found under the soil of one of the Thompson properties, which was under Liam's name and given to him in their father's will. It hadn't come as much of a surprise to them, as they'd expected something like this after Liam had threatened to kill Alvin in front of them one evening, after one of their many fights. Though they couldn't believe he would have killed a family man who also happened to be his stepbrother and theirs, they'd hoped somewhere in their hearts that Liam would be innocent of the crime. But now, they had too much evidence to prove he was the killer to believe otherwise. The witness sat in Will's comfortable swivel chair behind his desk. In front of him were a pencil and a pad of paper with a few phrases to help him during the phone call he was about to make. This call was meant to lure Liam Thompson back to Mirage Mesa since they couldn't reach Rain Wallace or him. The witness's mother sat in front of Will's desk, twisting a handkerchief in her lap. Her beautiful face was stricken with grief over her husband's death, and she looked dazed as she watched her son, Milo, prepare to trap her husband's killer. Will perched on the corner of his desk. "Are you feeling okay, Milo?" The handsome 13-year-old looked at him, swallowed, and nodded. He was tall, slim, and well-built for his age. He wore his dark suit, white shirt, and dark tie with the relaxed air of a privileged kid who was just as used to wearing suits as jeans. In that way, he was just like Liam at that age. "Take another drink of water while I go over this one more time, okay?" "Okay, Mr. Parker, please, call me Will. Do you think you're ready for this call?" Despite his visible anxiety, the boy nodded, then nodded again with more conviction. "He may be my favorite uncle, but he killed my father. I'll do whatever it takes to get him here." "I know you will," Will said, smiling a little because at that moment, sitting behind Will's polished desk in his executive chair, Milo Thompson looked more mature and more in control than a boy his age would. If anyone could get Liam running back to Mirage Mesa in hours, it would be his favorite nephew, who, from what Will had heard, was more like a son to him ever since Alvin Thompson had died. Liam would do anything to see that the boy got whatever he wanted. "Okay, let's go through it one more time. All you have to do is tell Liam that your father's body has been found and his killer has confessed to the crime." "I understand. Then you'll tell him your aunties and your mother have taken the news very badly, and you need him to come back here because you're really scared." "All right," Milo said. Then he added, with a touch of innocent charm, "I know I can do the last part, Will, because I am, really, really scared. Try to be as convincing as you can about all of it. I definitely will. I'll get him here in no time. He smirked with a teenage arrogance despite his claim of being scared. Satisfied, Will leaned across the desk to his telephone and pressed the intercom button. Make the call, trying not to do anything to make the teenage boy more nervous than he already pretended to be. Will reached slowly behind him and turned on the tape recorder. Then he glanced at his watch. It was 1:40 p.m. in Maranta, and according to their informant yesterday, Liam Thompson was in his hotel suite. In the hotel suite Liam was staying in, he called his driver to bring his work to the hotel, trying to make time pass more quickly and distract himself from thoughts of the ordeal Rain was facing. He was now working on something important on his laptop before Rain would come back and they could check out of the hotel together. When his phone rang, Liam continued typing away on his laptop with his right hand and reached absently toward his phone on the coffee table with his left, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Uncle Liam, it's me. It's Milo," the boy clarified needlessly in a voice so shaken he was nearly stuttering. "Why do you sound like that, Milo?" Liam asked, rising slowly to his feet in anticipation of very bad news. "It's my dad." Closing his eyes, Liam waited for what he'd known he would hear someday. "They found his body buried on the property you named after me." "I'm so sorry," Liam said hoarsely. Then he opened his eyes and shook his head to clear it. "What? The Milo land I promised to give you when you turn 18? "Yes, his rotting body was found there. He was murdered. He was shot in the head." Afraid to say the wrong thing, Liam waited helplessly for the boy to say more. "Go on, Milo, I'm right here. I'm listening. The land caretaker shot him. He confessed. That filthy old piece of shit did it, and he admitted everything to the FBI when all the evidence pointed to him. That worthless old fuck, he shot my father to death. Please, Uncle Liam, can you come home? Auntie Katie and Ori are not picking up my calls, and my mom has locked herself in her room. Me and baby Jelly are left alone. I'm scared. I'll come home," Liam promised. "Tonight? Please say you'll come tonight. I'm trying to be brave and be the man of the family, like you've taught me to be, until you get here and take care of things." His voice broke, and Liam's heart squeezed in sympathy as he couldn't imagine what the young boy must be going through in such a situation. "Uncle Liam, I'm really scared for my mom. She has a knife up there in her room and she isn't answering me or Jelly. Jelly's been crying non-stop," he sobbed, referring to his little sister who was currently sleeping at home with the nanny. "I'll be there. Will you leave right away?" Liam glanced at his watch. "I'll leave here around 6. That's 4 your time. I should be there by 9. "Okay," he said meekly. "Uncle Liam?" "What, son?" Liam said. "I want you to know that I really, really love you. Much more than my father. You make me so proud to be a Thompson." Liam swallowed over an unfamiliar constriction in his throat and stared out the window. "Thank you for telling me that. I will be there before you know it." In Mirage Mesa, Milo leaned back in his chair and grinned broadly at his mesmerized audience. "How did I do?" he asked, tapping his pencil on the yellow pad like a drumstick on a drum. "It was a bunch of nonsense, but I think it did the job, don't you? I thought the way I improvised about the land caretaker had a nice touch. The poor caretaker's ears must be ringing by now. Poor bastard," he chuckled in amusement. On the other side of the office, Ori Thompson, Lily's mother, suppressed a shiver and avoided meeting her sister's eyes. "You did amazing, Milo," Will said proudly, and stood up. "You are absolutely amazing." Back in the hotel, Liam began to arrange his things to leave. There was no question that he needed to leave for Zen immediately and lend what moral support he could to his stepbrother's children and wife for the next few days. Once he explained to Rain why he needed to be in Zen, she would understand and forgive him. He knew that without a doubt. She was so kind and soft-hearted that she couldn't bear to abandon an injured stray dog, so she would instantly realize that he couldn't abandon those innocent children despite his differences with their father. It was his responsibility to be there for them, just this one last time before he would leave the country in a week with Rain, if she would be willing to move with him and agree for him to help her get back the chain of restaurants she wanted so badly to buy back. That way, she wouldn't have to burden herself with the one in Zen when she could put someone else in charge of everything. But for now, he had to go back home. He could fly back and forth between Zen and Maranta for the next few days while the FBI cleared up everything and ensured the children were in good hands. It was only a few hours each way, and he could get the sleep he needed on the plane. However, the idea of leaving Rain behind in another hotel, just as her boyfriend had done, was untenable. She'd mentioned that she'd like to tour the entire island, he remembered, and the best possible solution suddenly occurred to him. He could arrange for her to tour the island with the yacht he'd ordered to be brought for him. She could cruise the islands on the yacht during the day while he was gone. She'd enjoy that. In a few days, Mia and Neil would be back, and she'd have her friend to keep her company while he would be away attending to his family matters, Liam decided, already reaching for his phone. His first call was to his pilots, instructing them to be ready to leave for Zen at 6 o'clock. His second phone call was to the hotel's front desk, notifying them that he would be checking out immediately. His next phone call was to Neil in New York. Chapter 33. Neil sat in his sprawling office on the upper floor of their New York penthouse, surrounded by the city's skyline shimmering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The soft hum of traffic below was barely audible from this height, and the glow of city lights cast a warm ambiance throughout the room. Despite the luxury and space, the room felt cozy, especially with the sounds of family life emanating from the adjoining dining area. Mia stood by the dining table serving dinner to their twins, Nolan and Noah, who were energetically trying to convince her to let them stay in New York for a few more months since they would be returning in a couple of days. "Mom, come on, say something," Noah pleaded, his lips pursed in determination as he looked up at his mother from where he sat at the dining table. Mia sighed for the 100th time. "You know we can't stay here that long. Your father has to go back to running his company, and I have to go back to work too. We'll come back here for another vacation if you behave." Nolan's face hardened in disapproval, his expression mirroring his father's. "No way in hell are we waiting for another vacation. Nolan." Mia gave him a disapproving look for his language, which he'd picked up from his father. She'd always told Neil to watch his language around their children, but he always slipped. Nolan immediately grinned up at her, his gray eyes twinkling with mischief. "Sorry, Mom, I just don't get why grown-ups get so worked up about kids cursing. Dad says hell and the F word all the time, so why can't we say it too? Because you are still a kid. You'll be 5 in a few months, so act your age and stop trying to be a grown-up," Mia said, shaking her head as she'd noticed lately that her twins were beginning to act mature and hang around adults rather than their age mates. "Behave, and I'll see that we return to New York next year." She picked up Melissa's bowl and walked towards Neil, who was working on his laptop with their sleeping daughter on his lap. As Mia arrived, Neil was just hanging up a call, his handsome face lit with amusement. Despite the years that had passed, nothing about Neil's features had changed. He'd recently gotten a new haircut in the city when he'd gone out with the boys yesterday and returned looking like a younger version of himself when they were still kids in Mirage Mesa, matching their son's styles. Neil looked up as Mia approached. He stood from behind his desk, balancing their almost 2-year-old sleeping daughter in one hand while leaning down to peck Mia's lips. "Hi," he whispered softly, using his free hand to massage her nape. He knew how hard she'd been working lately without much rest, especially since they hadn't brought the nanny with them to New York and she had to take care of their children's needs on her own and prepare their meals. Mia closed her eyes in pleasure as Neil's fingers worked their magic, massaging her nape and running through her scalp. "That feels so good," she moaned. Neil smiled down at her, promising, "I'll massage you all over when we retire to bed." "How about that?" Mia nodded, knowing that promise would come with more than just a massage. When his hands fell away, she opened her eyes and asked curiously, "What were you grinning about a moment ago when I walked in?" Neil had a strong urge to tell her that he'd just spoken to Liam, who had finally found his other half. But he held back, remembering Liam's request to keep it a secret for now. Liam wanted to surprise Mia with the news when they returned. That was if Rain hadn't already told her about her new relationship with the man she used to despise. But he knew Rain hadn't, because if she had, Mia would have told him about it. Thus, he decided to do as Liam had said and keep his mouth shut to surprise his wife, who, in the past, would always say it would be impossible for Liam to ever settle down with one woman with his habit of jumping from one to another. Instead, Neil gently pinched her nose and said, "My curious little kitten. I just got off the call with Liam." Mia's eyes sparkled with interest. "What did Liam say that made you grin?" Neil's smile widened, but he kept his secret. "He's got some exciting news, but I'll let him share it with you when the time comes. For now, let's just say things are looking up for him." Rain zipped her suitcase closed, carried it into the living room, and put it down next to her other suitcase. She'd gone over what she wanted to say to Max so many times that she was afraid it was going to sound like a well-rehearsed speech, even though she felt nothing but unemotional about the hurt she was about to cause him. She couldn't see any point in staying in a relationship that wasn't progressing anywhere. She'd always thought she would never feel a real love connection with anyone until the day she met Liam in that restaurant. She would never let the opportunity of knowing the feeling of being in the arms of the one you love slip by. Besides, she'd already intended to end it with Max even before she bumped into Liam. With nothing else left to do, she stepped outside onto the terrace, and a sense of nostalgia and well-being began to bloom inside her. Only a few days ago she'd stood in this spot, talking to Mia on the phone and feeding Eric strips of bacon. The future had seemed so bleak that morning, and now it was dazzlingly bright and filled with hopeful promise. Everything had changed in 3 short days. She'd fallen in love with a man she'd never imagined she could love. Smiling, she walked forward and ran her hand along the terrace's stone balustrade while sweet memories drifted through her mind. At the edge of the garden near the beach was the clump of palms she'd been standing under when Liam relented and came back to answer some of her questions. He'd wrapped his arms around her and pulled her to him. On the terrace, exactly where she was standing right now, they danced together for the first time. She'd mistakenly thought he intended to kiss her. "But I do intend to seduce you," he'd whispered. He'd really been outrageously frank about his intentions that night, but he had wanted her badly enough to change his mind and come back to her in the garden. He'd been just as frank the next day in the suite at the El Jardín Escondido, Rain remembered with a smile. "In Zen, there's an eligible man who wants to marry you. Here, in this room, there's a man who wants to make crazy love to you until neither of us has the strength to move anymore. But it can't go any further than that. It would get much too intricate for me and my life." A few moments later, a compromise. And when Liam compromised, he was utterly irresistible. "Let's get involved, Rain." "Rain?" Max's voice made her whirl around in time to see him closing the door. A tall, fit, attractive man with blonde hair and blue eyes who'd been part of her life for 5 years. A man she'd once thought she loved. "How did you get the key to enter?" she asked, a little surprised that he'd entered without her hearing any sounds. "Since you're never here," he said, striding toward her, "I stopped at the front desk and—" His gaze fell on her suitcases and moved back to her face. "What's going on?" Nervously rubbing her hands on the sides of her pants, Rain tried to smile as she nodded toward the sofa and said, "Come over here, and let's sit down. We need to talk." "Let's go straight to the point instead," he said coolly. "You're angry because I left you down here, and I'm just as angry because you paid me back by ignoring my calls and putting me through long periods of daily hell, worrying that your headaches were bothering you and thinking about things like brain tumors. Why the heck did you pack your bags?" he demanded. Without waiting for an answer, he turned on his heel and walked over to the bar. And in that bizarre moment, when Rain knew it was over between them, she watched him and understood the reasons he'd appealed to her in the past: his self-assurance, his ability to go right to the heart of the matter and see it from both sides, and his ability to keep his head when everyone else was losing theirs. She watched him take a swallow of his drink, and when he lowered the glass and scowled at her, she smiled a little and made a silent wish that he'd find someone wonderful right away to replace her. "Why are you smiling?" he asked. "I'm wishing you get exactly the woman you deserve. And why would you say such a thing when I already have you here?" Torn between remorse and tears, Rain bit her lip and looked down. She hated causing pain to someone, but she couldn't keep staying in a relationship that wouldn't progress to anything. Max had been more than her lover. He'd been her friend. She was losing a friend and about to hurt him, too. Lifting her head, she drew a long breath and said softly, "I said that because I'll no longer be yours, Max." His hand stilled in the act of raising the glass to his mouth. With his gaze turned on her, he reached out and put the glass back on the bar. "What are you talking about? I met someone I like here, and there's something special between us. I have to give it a chance." He was so still it was unnerving. "When did all this happen?" "A few days ago," she said, avoiding his blue eyes. "Who is he?" he demanded coolly. "No one you know. Where did you meet him?" "Max, please. Help me understand how a man you've known for a few days can make you throw away a 6-year relationship. Give me some details. I've known him before. We just never had the chance to get to know each other personally. He's not a stranger to me. What's his name?" "It doesn't matter what his name is. It damn well matters to me. I want a name to curse in private," he yelled. "He stole you from me right under my nose, and you want me to just let go without knowing who the bastard is? Tears stung Rain's eyes. You've already slept with him, haven't you? He concluded bitterly. It took me 5 months to get you into bed, and he accomplished it in 2 days. I'd better leave, Rain said, reaching down for her suitcase. Let's have a name before you go. Liam Thompson. An expression of utter disbelief froze his face. He then chuckled dryly. Why was he even surprised when he'd heard about her being with Liam Thompson? Liam Thompson? He repeated. So it's true you've gotten involved with Liam Thompson down here? You know about it? She asked, taken aback. I've heard about him being on the island, he clipped. That little fucker must be laughing his ass off now. What do you mean? Rain asked, relieved that something was distracting him from his hurt feelings. I met Liam Thompson at one of my business partner's events a week ago in Zen. I specifically told him that my girlfriend and I were going to be down here, staying at the Island Club. He pretended not to have heard me because of the little difference between us. I'm Jason's best friend, and he hated your brother. Forgive me for sounding paranoid, but I find it just a little strange that he supposedly ignored all the women at that event who were flinging themselves at him. And he hasn't been able to find a single woman to suit him anywhere on any of these islands, until he happened to bump into you, in a hotel that he isn't staying at, and while I'm away. This whole thing doesn't look like a coincidence to me, it looks like payback. He has no idea I know you, Rain interjected. I've never told him your name. She'd never mentioned that Max Everett was her boyfriend. The villa you're staying in is in my name, he retorted. Rain saw no reason to argue that insignificant point, but she was stunned that her decision to leave him was driving him to such confusing leaps of imagery logic. Just to hear what he had to say, she sighed. Payback for what? She asked calmly. Chapter 34. Payback for what? She said calmly. Did Liam tell you anything about what he did to your brother? I'm not interested in what happened between him and Jason. Then get interested in it, Rain, he ordered sharply. You never gave Jason the chance to explain everything to you when your family business fell apart. You never knew the reason he lost all the money he used to sell your chain of restaurants. Let me tell you the truth, Liam Thompson was behind everything. Liam has nothing to do with the Wallace chains of restaurants. He wasn't even in the country when it happened, she jumped to his defense, not buying any of his words. Well, sorry to burst your tiny little bubble. He has everything to do with your family's downfall. He was the one who set Jason up with a man who scammed him out of his wealth. If you remember clearly, they were never friends since their days in the military. Everything that happened was set up by Liam Thompson. He is a cunning son of a bitch who even went behind my back to ruin my contract with that company I told you my father was pursuing. Inwardly, Rain was shocked but anxious to get this over with. Explain to me what all this has to do with the fact that he loves me? Max closed his eyes and took a deep breath at the fact that she wasn't getting his point. When he opened them, he said, You aren't listening, are you? I've known you for a long time, and you're not easy to dazzle, Rain. Or maybe I just didn't try the right methods. You never seemed to give a damn about social status, or money, or anything else like that I had to offer. So my question is this. How in the hell did he accomplish in 2 days what I couldn't accomplish in 5 years? Max, please don't do this, Rain said, her eyes filling with sudden tears because she'd never imagined it was going to be this hard to break up with a man who'd loved her for 6 years. Tell me, I need to know. Words have been spreading among the elites that Thompson will be leaving the country for good to start afresh somewhere else. Did he tell you about that? Rain managed to keep her expression indifferent. It didn't matter that Liam hadn't mentioned his relocating. They'd been too busy making love and getting to know each other. No, she said calmly. Did he tell you about the fight he had with Jason and the oath he made about destroying the Wallace family? Max, please stop this. I have to go, Rain said, trying to sound offhand. She didn't want to have any reason to question Liam's intentions about her. Max wasn't fooled by her replies. Her complexion was too fair and her eyes too expressive to hide shock or dismay. Not until you've heard what I have to say, Rain. Liam Thompson used you to get back at your brother and me. Liam would never do such a thing, she exclaimed, firm in her opinion of Liam and the trust she'd come to have in him. He would never use her. She knew it because she could feel it. I hope you're right, honey, because the same man we're talking about has been living in Zen with Ashley Thompson. Who? Rain asked in frustration. Alvin Thompson's wife. The beautiful Ashley was, and still is, Alvin Thompson's wife. Your Liam is shacked up with his half-brother's wife, and he moved in just as soon as her husband disappeared with the pretense of being there for her children. He told me about his stepbrother and the children, Rain said quickly, glad for once that she knew something. He likes the children like they were his, and if Ashley Thompson's home is typical of most elite houses, then it's the size of a hotel. Lifting his hand, Max smoothed her hair back off her forehead. Then he dropped his arm. Don't let that son of a bitch hurt you too badly. And when he does, Max added tenderly, you remember that it was me, not you, he wanted to hurt. Maybe that will make it easier. He picked up his drink and glanced at her luggage. I should carry those for you, but I can't make myself help you go to him. I'm sorry, Rain. It was a grudging apology, not a parting taunt. Shaking inside, Rain watched him walk out onto the terrace and into the garden. Questions and doubts were raging through her as she walked into the bathroom to make sure she wasn't leaving anything behind. Instead of doing that, she stood in front of the sink, trying to rid herself of Max's slant on everything Liam did, and to think things through for herself. In her mind, she heard Liam whispering, I felt all the same things you did last night, and you know I did, and her spirits lifted. That was real. That was the real Liam, not Max's version of him. Liam would never use her to get back at Jason. Jason had gambled their family wealth away and was looking for an easy way out by blaming it on someone else, and since Max was a stranger to Jason's real character, he would believe everything her brother told him about Liam. That was the only explanation she had for all of this. As far as everything else Max had brought up about Ashley Thompson and Liam's oath to destroy the Wallace, Rain could think of valid reasons and explanations for all of it, including gossip. There was just one thing she couldn't justify, no matter how hard she tried. If Max was right about Liam living, even temporarily, in Zen, there was only one possible reason for Liam's having concealed that fact from her. He had no intention of seeing her after they left the island. She needed an answer to that right now, not later when they were face to face and he could disarm her or distract her. A simple, straightforward answer. After all, Liam had sent her here expecting her to break up with Max in the shortest possible time, and then to hurry back to him. She had every right to expect a straightforward answer to her question when they would soon start a new relationship. Closing the bathroom door, she dug in her purse for her phone, and since she didn't have his number, she took out the booklet from the hotel they checked into. Her fingers trembled as she typed the numbers on her phone, and her pulse edged up with each ring. By the time the hotel operator answered the phone, Rain was leaning back against the vanity for support, and her voice actually wavered with nervousness when she asked to be connected to Mr. Thompson in the presidential suite. I'm sorry, ma'am, the operator said a moment later, Mr. Thompson has checked out. Checked out? Did he leave a message for me, for Rain Wallace, I mean? One moment please. Rain's knees began to knock while she waited. No, ma'am, no message, the operator stated with certainty. Rain twisted around and made a grab for the vanity, trying to hold her quaking body upright while Liam's mocking voice whispered in her ringing ears. I do intend to seduce you. It can't go any further than that. It would get much too intricate for me in my life. Especially not the kind that would follow if you think for a moment there would be anything else between us other than this. The sound of her own sobbing drowned out his voice, and Rain searched blindly for a towel, holding it tightly to her face, trying to muffle her cries before Max heard them. Desperate to get herself under control and to get out of there before Max walked in from the garden, she threw the towel down and splashed cold water onto her face. Then she opened the door a crack and saw that the living room was empty. With tears pouring from her eyes and blurring her vision, she grabbed her suitcase and bag, made an awkward dash for the door, and struggled with the knob. Her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, she nudged the door open with her knee and was halfway outside when Max walked in from the terrace. Rain, wait, let me help you with. Don't come any closer, she called, keeping her face averted, but she couldn't stop her shoulders from jerking. What's wrong with? His hands locked on her arms, turning her around. He took one look at her tormented face and pulled her against his chest. What's wrong, my love? Please don't be nice to me. I was leaving you for him, and he's gone. Don't worry, he said dryly. I don't feel like being very nice to you right now. Why don't I take you home first? Rain nodded, too choked up to speak. I have to pick up my dog. Chapter 35. After taking Eric from the veterinarian, the big dog bounded onto the floor of the Porsche Macan backseat, and Rain had to scoot over into the center to avoid stepping on him. The car had been assigned to them in the hotel to take them to the airport, and Eric had taken almost all the space in the back seat. Max went around to the passenger side and opened the back door. "Oh man, this is going to be a tight fit," he said, wedging himself in beside Rain. Once he was inside, his left thigh and leg were pressed against hers, and there was no room for his left arm, so he put it across the back of the seat behind her. They had sat this way hundreds of times before, but now their proximity felt awkward, and having his arm casually resting there seemed all wrong to Rain, who was still finding it hard to believe that she'd been used. Max felt it, too. She could sense his tension. He was wounded and angry at her betrayal. She didn't deserve his kindness or his compassion, and the fact that he was offering both right now, when she needed them most and deserved them least, made her feel so ashamed that she bent her head and tears gathered in her eyes. Eric laid his big head on her knee, his unblinking, adoring gaze on her face, and she reached out to scratch his head while 2 tears ran down her cheeks. It belatedly dawned on Rain that she hadn't even given Max the courtesy of an apology for what she'd done, and she swallowed twice, trying to drag her voice through the knot of emotion in her throat. I am sorry," she whispered. "I know you are." Wishing desperately that she had a tissue, Rain felt in her purse, but there were none in there. Max's garment bag was on the seat beside her, and she reached for the zipper on it while tears began streaking in earnest from her eyes. "Do you have tissues or a handkerchief or something I could use in here?" "I think so," Max replied. "Pass it over to me and I'll look." "Don't bother," she said, already tugging on the zipper. "I'll check it." "Don't open," Max said, but it was too late. Lying atop all the neatly packed masculine attire in Max's bag was a thick, square, red Tiffany box tied with a maroon ribbon. It was a ring box. Rain stared at it through a fresh haze of tears, and for the second time in less than an hour, she covered her face and cried her heart out. He hesitated, his jaw hardening as he stared at the ring box, and then he lowered his arm around her shaking shoulders and curved his hand around her arm, drawing her close so she could weep against his chest. "I didn't know you meant to propose to me, but I cheated on you. I am so sorry. I don't deserve even your forgiveness," Rain whispered brokenly. "And I don't mean to forgive you, Rain," he whispered, caressing her arm. "I hate myself," she said fiercely. He thought about that for a moment. "I hate you, too," he said, but there was a small smile in his voice that made Rain believe he was just joking. Rain closed her eyes. She couldn't let herself think about Liam yet, or she would shatter. Exhausted from the turmoil, and the struggle to keep thoughts of him at bay, she dozed off as they moved smoothly along the short distance to the airport. When she opened her eyes, she found that Max had taken her hand in his and he was holding it tightly on his lap. "Wake up, we're here," he said, and took his hand away. While she was sleeping, he'd slid the dazzling diamond ring from the box onto her ring finger. Rain stared at it and started to shake her head in protest. "I can't, don't protest yet. Here is what I'm proposing," Max clarified. "I need some time to get past what has happened between us, and so do you. In the meantime, I suggest we announce our engagement to the media." "Why?" He leaned close and whispered, "Well, for one thing, that ring will look very nice with whatever dress you wear to the new shopping center launching this weekend. My family is one of the investors, and remember, you've agreed to go there with me as my partner." Rain looked at him in disbelief as he took his arm away and reached into his pocket to tip the hotel driver. "What's the other thing?" "Most of the Thompson family will be there because they are also one of the mall investors. Now," he continued conversationally as he opened the car door, "I don't know about you, but if I were in your place, I'd like it if Liam Thompson was forced to realize that he'd been used instead of the other way around." "Used as what?" Rain asked bitterly. He slanted her a sideways smile tinged with just a little regret. "Your last fling before your marriage." Liam had been standing at the shore of Pineville where they had agreed to meet at 5 p.m., but it was 5:30 p.m. now with no signs of her. However, he wasn't discouraged. He continued to wait patiently for her, believing she would show up sooner or later. He stood there, completely unaware of the men secretly taking his pictures from a distance. "What's he waiting for?" one of the men asked his partner, who shrugged casually. "Who knows? Send the shots to the boss so he can forward them to the FBI. He's been standing there for almost an hour." The other man raised the camera again and focused on Thompson for another quick shot. "The guy is a woman magnet," he remarked a little wistfully, watching through the camera's lens as a pretty woman strolled into the frame. "Excuse me," a female voice said. Could you tell me what time it is? She asked with a flowery voice as she glanced up at the most handsome man she had ever set eyes on. It's 5:40, Liam replied without looking at his watch or the woman. He just checked the time, and his attention was now fastened on a new boat appearing on the horizon. As the boat grew larger, it appeared to be about the right size and moving at about the right speed for a tourist boat. The island coastline was dotted with marinas and wharfs, however, and most boats coming over the horizon appeared to be headed in his general direction at first, so Liam kept a tight rein on his expectations. A few minutes later, the boat was still angled toward Pineville shoreline, and Liam's pulse began edging up, notch by notch, while his gaze fastened on the boat's bow, willing it not to change direction again. The boat came nearer, grew larger, and Liam began searching for a glimpse of shining red hair among the blur of passengers on deck. A few minutes later, the island sun had begun to set, and the last passenger on the boat had walked past him without signs of his woman being among them. Liam returned to his vantage point on the other side of the shoreline and scanned the horizon for signs of another tourist boat headed towards his direction. Obviously, the boyfriend's flight had been delayed, and he'd arrived an hour or two late, which was delaying Rain. Smiling a little, he marveled, yet again, that neither he nor Rain had thought to exchange phone numbers. In the hours before she left this morning, they'd shared a sunrise, laughter, several stories, long kisses, and the most exciting, satisfying lovemaking of his life. They had not, however, shared their phone numbers, which wasn't all that surprising on his part, Liam thought wryly, because he'd lost the ability and the desire to concentrate on anything else when she was near. After 30 minutes and another boat arrived, Liam was no longer smiling. The sun had set behind the horizon, leaving behind its orange hue in the sky, and as darkness loomed, his mind began conjuring unbearable images of Rain cowering in a corner from her enraged boyfriend or lying alone in the villa, injured or worse. Once those possibilities had occurred to him, he was powerless to ignore them. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, and after being transferred to 2 operators, he was finally able to get through to the island club. At the last moment, he remembered the manager who knew about Rain and him was away, and he asked to speak to whoever was in charge instead. A male answered and asked how he could be of service. "This is Liam Thompson," Liam replied, trying to sound less frightened than he felt. "Miss Wallace, in Villa 5, was feeling ill earlier, and she isn't answering her phone. Please send someone down to check on her while I hold on." "Miss Wallace?" the man repeated. "Villa 5? Are you certain?" "Very certain," Liam snapped in frustration. "Send someone to go check on her immediately." "I'm happy to be able to rid your fears, Mr. Thompson," the man said cheerfully after a moment. "The phone in Villa 5 isn't being answered because the villa is unoccupied." "What do you mean it's unoccupied?" he asked, taken aback. "I mean that the couple occupying Villa 5 checked out at 4 o'clock today." "Is there anything?" Liam ended the call, disconnecting the man in mid-sentence, but his brain refused to process the obvious implications of what he'd just heard. Paralyzed with disbelief, he stood where he was, gazing blindly at the darkened horizon, his phone hanging loosely from his hand. Not once since Rain had waved goodbye to him this morning had he ever considered that she'd leave him standing there at the shore. She was in love with him, and he was in love with her. Their feelings for each other were deepening with every hour they spent together. They were meant to be, and Rain had realized that even before he had. Rain wanted a connection, and they had it in unbelievable abundance. She didn't have that with her boyfriend. She would never have checked out of the island club and gone home with him without even giving him the courtesy of an explanation. The obvious answer was that the boyfriend had checked out and gone home alone. Rain was probably on her way to him right now, as eager to kiss him hello as he was to return her kiss. There was a way to find out. Slowly, Liam pulled his wallet out of his pocket and removed the veterinarian's contact card he'd tucked into his pocket yesterday. Looking at it, he tapped on his phone screen with his thumb, his heart beginning to beat with dread. "This is Liam Thompson," he told the vet when he answered the phone. "I was wondering if Miss Wallace came by to pick up Eric yet." "Yes, she did. She picked him up several hours ago, and he was very happy to see her. I had all the documents ready that she needed to travel with him." "That's good," Liam said, his chest constricting in pained disbelief. "Did she bring someone else to help her with the dog?" "Oh yes, she did. A nice, handsome gentleman with blonde hair and blue eyes." Liam's heart shattered at the vet's words. A sharp, searing pain coursed through him, and he felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath his feet. Disbelief, raw and unrelenting, twisted inside him, making it hard to breathe. He clenched his jaw and turned, walking briskly towards his private jet at the hangar a few walks away. A few minutes later, the white jet roared down the runway. Then it lifted off and vanished swiftly into the darkness, its presence in the sky marked only by tiny flashes of light.